In the post-Civil War era, Jim Crow laws were used to segregate white and black citizens. African Americans were denied equal opportunities of voting, education, and other basic human rights. As long ago as these horrific events were, we can still see unequal and segregated activity in our society today. It is especially prevalent in the treatment of black people in higher education. The graduation rates, post-grad opportunities, and overall education gap in the U.S. are drastically dominated by the white population, and a large part of that stems from unequal opportunities going into higher ed. Men of color are often seen as having social attitude problems and are stigmatized in society. In schools, there is an overrepresentation of black men in special education classrooms. Black students made up only 17% of total school enrollment, but made up 33% of enrollment in the intellectually disabled. This differential treatment based on race leads to unwelcoming environments. Despite going to higher education and earning a degree, black students may not have the same fiscal success and job fulfillment as their white counterparts. The barriers of entry to academic success are much more than they are for white students, with poverty, educational access, lack of resources and support, and racism in the school system. Many black students are alongside the majority of white students, many who claim to be anti-racist, and many of them will be. But there are those who believe that students should get accepted into schools based on their merit, not just because they're black. This dismissal of affirmative action is inherently racist. It does not take into account why affirmative action is in place. It is used to address the blatant discrimination against minorities, and it is needed today just as much as it was in the 1960s. Different races' viewpoints of affirmative action policies are mirrored through the social hierarchy, white people at the top being the least supportive, Asians and Hispanics in the middle, and black people at the bottom with the most support. Because those who have always been on the top don't see the need for affirmative action because they've never had problems with it. In higher education, between 76 different institutions, only 2.8% of undergraduates are black men, but they made up 57% of college basketball teams and 64% of college football teams. These students' identities are reduced to their athletic ability. Student athletes are not treated the same as their academic peers, but the intersectionality of being both black and a student athlete led to further unequal academic treatment. About 97% of institutions graduated black male athletes at lower rates than undergraduate students overall. They are often perceived as the black group or as dumb jocks, and sports is their one way to achieve higher education and success. For many of these black students, becoming an athlete was their way out. But because of that, they aren't given the same time, ability, and support to focus on their academics. In conclusion, the educational disparities against African Americans has been a persistent problem that needs to be acknowledged and changed. What starts as segregation in childhood transforms into higher education and further puts black people at disadvantages in post-grad opportunities. We must bring attention to these disparities in hopes to dismantle white power in the education system and bridge the opportunity gap for future African American students.